Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back to the show. We're excited to have the Family Collective joining us here again. Diane Arnold joining us live today. Of course, we're going to have a great conversation. As a licensed professional counselor, she specializes in mental health and relationship concerns. And again, it's at the Family Collective. So the website, thefamilycollective.co. And welcome back today. How are you?
Good. How are you, Jill?
I'm doing well. It's feeling like spring in New York. You're in Charleston, right? South Carolina, so it's already hot.
Yeah, it is seriously already 80 something today. It
Oh
is
my
warm.
goodness.
I
Beautiful.
know.
Well, spring is in the air. Happy Passover, happy Easter to everyone. And time of year to reflect and to think about things. And of course, as a licensed mental health professional, we could all use a boost in our mental health. So please tell us a little bit about yourself and company before we begin today's conversation.
Well, the Family Collective is, like we talked about last week, something that our family started with the idea that we could give back some of the things that we've gleaned over the years, not just as a couple, my husband and I, and we talked a little bit about that. Went through some really hard things in our own marriage, but we also really have a heart for trying to help people either cope with the family situations that they have or even get back to a healthier family situation. So we have a lot of resources for that. And we are actually in the process of putting out some information on the topic that we're going to talk about today.
Perfect. Yeah, I know it's about, never enough, right? What does it mean to never be enough, right? Sometimes you say we feel like we're not good enough because we compare ourselves with so many different people, especially in this world of social media and seeing people out there day in and
Right.
day out. And we may be comparing our weaknesses to another person's strengths. So we're going to talk about this today, and you're going to give us some examples, of course, of what are some examples of never being enough, if you don't mind sharing this topic to start.
Yeah. And I know that you can relate, I can relate, that's one of the things that happens in this life is we unfortunately compare ourselves, or some people get the sad, reality of being told that they're not enough, whether it be from their families, whether it be middle school drama, if you remember that, or even, authority figures in their life today. You can have, bosses, you can have, people in your life today that you may struggle with feeling that you never really measure up.
Yeah.
Right. And so there are things that I think, well, I know that research tells us some common things that where those come from or where we can get hit in these, and body image is huge, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we have everywhere you look, somebody's perfect, right? And then there's constantly concerns about our monies or jobs. You may have been born with poverty or wealth, and people compare, different things to other people all the time. Weirdly, a lot of things that are happening right now with people, the younger generation, I shouldn't say weirdly, but they're struggling with, being a good family themselves. How do I be a good mother or father myself? If I didn't have a great example, that is something that I really want to make sure that I do, well or better. Our backgrounds can make us feel like we're different. Our physical health, of course, our mental health. Some people have serious concerns about their faith. And I would say surviving trauma and being labeled, stereotyped are in the top list of where people are, it doesn't feel like I measure up.
It's so true. Sad, but true. Yeah.
Is that true? Everybody's in that list going, yeah, right? And I don't know, maybe you have some other examples, or maybe the people out there that are listening have some other examples. But one of the things that came to my mind when I was thinking about talking with you about this, do you remember the story of Pretty Woman?
Of
from
Of
the
course.
movie.
Julia Roberts, Richard Gere, a
Yeah,
classic. Yeah.
right.
Yes.
And she's, a working woman, and she goes to shop on Rodeo Drive,
Mm-hmm.
and they won't let her buy anything.
Yeah. They're judging
And
her because the way she's
they're-
dressed, the way she looks, beautiful woman, but in
right.
very skimpy, risque clothes, which, you would normally not see that on Rodeo Drive. I get it, but talk about discrimination.
And just what was going through her head is what I thought of. And as
Yeah.
you kind of follow through, that story, she starts to dress differently. She starts to get treated differently. She starts feeling loved, accepted, valued, by somebody. And the next thing you know, she starts to see herself that way. And as she sees herself that way, she starts holding herself differently. She starts, acting differently. And somewhere along the line, and I don't know the story, maybe like you do, but the Richard Gere's business partner finds out, that she's a prostitute, and he propositions her. And you watch what happens to her is exactly what happens to us when we feel that level of hurt or shame about something. She immediately gets hurt, angry, and she runs. She tries to leave. She tries to hide, to the point where she even tried to give back the money. If I remember the story correctly, she tries to give, like, her storyline in her head completely changes
Yeah.
because she thought I had some value, and someone came back and said, no, you don't.
Yeah.
This is this is who you are. And it's that shame that I want to kind of talk about a little bit today,
Mm-hmm.
because it's what makes us feel like we don't measure up.
Belong. Mm-hmm.
Right. And then what happens, right? Our hope turns into hopeless, and our power becomes powerless, and our worth becomes worthless, because we struggle with what's, you know, truly happening in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's ever been a sting for you, I want to talk a little bit about, some of the things that we can do to walk toward probably a healthier place, like we saw in that movie. So the first thing I would say is recognize, what are some of the symptoms when you know that's happening to you. Are you the person like Julia Roberts that wants to hide? Or are you the person that blows up,
Mm-hmm.
and gets angry at the world, or do you go away and blame yourself?
Yeah.
Or maybe pick up some bad coping mechanisms. People do this all the
Drugs,
time.
alcohol. Yep.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's because I'm trying to push down some feelings
Mm-hmm.
that are really real in my life, and then one of the things that after that I've seen that is very effective is we have to struggle to be vulnerable again. And I mean, that's so hard because you're telling someone to purposely take another risk when it's possibly taking another risk that caused the hurt, but if you don't, like you said, you're going to close down again.
Exactly. Yeah. And you say our hope turns into hopelessness, right? Our power becomes powerless. Our worth becomes feeling worthless. Bottom suddenly drops out of our security.
Right, right. And that's the place where I think, like I said, a lot of people struggle. You hear words like, again, I know everybody out here has heard this at one point or another, you're fired.
Mm-hmm.
I don't love you anymore. You don't belong here. Whatever the message is that you heard, that
Mm-hmm.
goes to that place where I'm very self-critical, and it's like, okay, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
Right. So I think along the way, and I'm going to just say, I'll use what we talked about last time, along the way where I heard those words in my life, I can relate to the fact, where you live in a fog, you try to pretend it's not happening, or, how could it be that someone doesn't love me or doesn't care for me anymore? Kind of like the Julia Roberts thing, you get numb and you try to go away.
Yeah.
And counselors, we acknowledge that there are some wounds so painful that even our own minds refuse to focus on them. We just numb it out, right? And so when that happens to us, we have to, well, basically what we worry about is that shame becomes an identity.
Yep.
You know, rather than something I did, it becomes I'm bad. It's who I am. You know, rather than something done or said to us, it's, you know, what I am.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely, it does. Yeah. And by the
Yeah.
way, just to point out, I want to remind everyone that we're speaking to you at the Family Collective. And just to get the best forms of contact, would you mind sharing again the website and any phone numbers you want to share before we continue?
The website is thefamilycollective.co, and the email address is the same at the
All
Family
right,
Collective.
thank you. Thank you so much. All right, sorry to interrupt. It was a kind interruption. So we're talking here today, thank you, with our guest, yeah, about, well, people feeling not good enough. I think it happens to so many of us and all of us, right, Diane? Diane Arnold here. She's a
Yes.
professional mental health counselor. She's based out of Charleston, South Carolina. And just to confirm, are you licensed in what states to work with people?
Yep, I'm only licensed to work with people in the state of South Carolina. And
Perfect.
so as you know, that was a great segue to the fact that, if anything that we're talking about,
Resonates with
resonates with anyone, we need to make sure we will, at the end of this, talk about a couple phone numbers that you can reach out to.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk more about recognizing these certain symptoms in a sense, right?
Yeah. Well, like I said, what does it mean? I think the most importantly is how do you walk out of this? Everybody knows they struggled with it at one point in their life, but how do I walk out of it? So how do I how do I open myself and become vulnerable again? Sometimes it's much easier to hide behind this,
So true.
and,
Yeah.
and right. And text somebody and not go out there and not say, you know what, I have this hurt. I have these problems. These things have, happened to me in my life. And I know that when we hide that, we basically isolate. And it's probably what I would love to talk about next time is, what it's like to feel alone. But, when we isolate, it just makes the pain worse. And people that are struggling with this actually try to shut off their need for vulnerability to avoid everything that all the hurt we just talked about, to not take those risks.
Yeah.
So if you want to experience, connection again, it's going to take a risk on your part. You're going to have to take a step toward it. And that's a hard thing for people to hear.
Scary, yeah.
It's a hard thing for people to hear, because like I said, sometimes you're in this place today because you did take a risk on something, and so you want to close yourself out and go away. So it's start of a mindset to say, okay, even if I'm not ready right now, at some point, I'm going to have to go back out there and be vulnerable again, and talk about some of my fears and uncertainties with, I would hope, safe people, people that, your friends or your family, start there. But that's what I would say would be the second thing, is to actually look for that relationship, maybe even at work.
Yeah.
Maybe there's someone you can start sharing with work. There was a research paper that was done out there where they had a gentleman who sat next to someone for 30 years. And every morning they said hello, and every, evening they said goodbye. And what in the end they realized is they had zero connection, right? They had never learned to be intimate or open with each other. And then there was someone who had sat next to someone for 6 weeks and had started to share, just share life. Here's some of the things that are great, and here's some of the things that are hard. And that couple, or those work couples, measured, hugely different in how well they knew each other, and how, you know, intimate they were in those relationships, and which one was more healthy
Mm-hmm.
was the 6 week relationship. So even there, to take those risks with someone at work where you may not have,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of walk out some of that vulnerability there,
Yeah.
a huge step toward starting to heal some of those feelings.
We could all use some healing for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Um, I would say looking for healthy love experiences. I'd love to explain that.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of Brene Brown?
No, no, not until you mentioned no.
No. So she's a researcher, and the funny thing about her research is actually what she researches is shame. And she's phenomenal. If you ever want to go look at some of her material, or some of her YouTube material, she's a great speaker, but it's very interesting. And one of the things that she says is, if you could put self disappointment into a petri dish and add unconditional love, if you could see that,
Mm-hmm.
if there's some, two entities that you could actually see, that the shame would not survive, that it is 100% the cure for that feeling that you have.
Yeah,
Isn't that amazing?
it is. It is.
With
Because, I mean, unfortunately, I think all of us have some of that, but it's hard to talk about, hard to face, hard to try to fix when, how many people come to you? I mean, they really want the change, they want the help, but they're also fearful. And that's part of a whole nother issue. You got that fear and that anxiety to try to make yourself better, but it's worth a shot. I always say, you know, the one thing after COVID was it kind of inspired me to live my best life. I mean, there was so much horrific, loss of lives, loss of jobs, loss of structure, everything. Who ever thought in 2000, in the 2000s period, we'd ever live like this in a pandemic? But at the same time, you realize the value of how precious life is, and it pulls me forward. And I say, no matter what I'm scared of, I got to at least try. You just never know when it's your last day. And yeah, I mean, if I could share that with someone who may be on the verge of, needing that mental help that they're not trying to get, why not? I mean, now is the time, and life is just so precious. And yeah, we're all fearful. We really are fearful of so much, but why not better yourself? You never know what can come
right.
from it. Yeah.
That's a great example, Jill. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
because I think there were a lot of people during the pandemic that struggled
Yeah.
with, not just fear, but
Yeah.
mistrust,
Mm-hmm.
and it all kind of culminated into people, like you said, hiding.
Yeah.
You know, I just, not necessarily from people, but from everything. Just like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where to turn. And your example is amazing, where you're like, no, I can't live like this. I
Mm-hmm.
need, I need to honestly take a risk,
Yeah.
because you did. I need to take the risk to go out there and live life. And I don't know if you chose to be with people or what you did, but you chose to do it differently
Yeah.
than to,
Absolutely.
yeah, than to just stay and go, okay, I can't, you know, I can't be like this. And I I agree, that's kind of what we're talking about, people who are struggling, thinking, okay, this, whatever it is, it's not going to measure it up,
Mm-hmm.
and I struggle with, it not being enough in my life. And, what do I need to do to step out of it? So knowing your symptoms,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, taking the risk that you took. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, because what you did, you expose yourself, you were vulnerable.
I think we all are. I just, want everyone to realize that, to try your best not to be ashamed of, easier said than done. But I'll let the expert speak. Let's continue the conversation. We still have a few minutes left, hon.
Yeah. Well, and so then the third thing we're talking about is purposely look for those love experiences. And I am not saying run out and go to, a bar and find somebody to be in love with tonight. I'm looking for people that will accept you and love you. And so I was just going to ask you that, Jill, when you said, I'm going to risk, I'm going to be vulnerable. Did you go toward people?
Yeah.
Did you have some friends? Yeah.
Friends, not
Friends and
family. I
family.
went to family and I realized that was a bad decision. And the truth
Okay.
is, sometimes it's better to go to a neutral party. And that's why I would
Yeah.
suggest a mental health counselor, someone, because they don't have that opinion or judgment about you already. I mean, talk about that, right? I mean, as a third party, the benefits of that, someone who gets to know you for and doesn't judge you. That could really help a lot.
Right. And that is part of the roadblock that, that people have is,
Mm-hmm.
I've trusted and I don't know where to
Yeah.
trust. And so we're saying, take the risk. And
Mm-hmm.
with the family collective, we're saying, let us help you with some of these relationships. Let us help you with some of these situations or thought patterns that you have that you're
Mm-hmm.
struggling with that can help you be your best you. That's what we want for you, is for you, like you said, I love that example, just to not be afraid to be your best you, to walk out whatever your destiny is.
Yeah.
At the family collective, we believe, a lot in our personal journey having to do with our faith.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that, that can be helpful when people are struggling and trying to figure out
Yeah.
some of these things. But um, I think the third thing is to look for those purposefully, those love experiences, people who are going to care deeply about you. And maybe they are people that are already in your life, but maybe they're people that you need to add to your life.
Sure.
I I remember when I was hiding and struggling myself, it seemed like, I would get people that would come to me and, bring a meal to our family, or, offer to take the kids, or
Yeah.
just, even people that would
Those.
say, "I'm just praying for you." It was people that were, and I needed to be open to those experiences. Like what I just said about Brene Brown, that exactly, the two things can't exist in a petri dish. The love will overtake that fear and that shame.
So true. Ah. Oh, we still have 5 minutes left. What else do you want to add? I know there's a lot to the notes, and not that we have to get to everything, but
No, but
what
come
else do
on.
you want to say?
No, well, I mean, is there anything that you would like to ask about it? I guess I would love if you would,
Well,
if there's a question you want to have, or.
well, my question, I mean, I was, don't you think it's, it's not a question, it's kind of telling you, but having a third party, someone who's not involved with the situation, I think makes it so much better and I think more productive for so many people. But yeah, I just had a bad experience, so not everybody will, but I love the fact that there is that third party, non-judgmental opinion, and I think that really can help someone overcome something, especially. But not everybody has family to rely on either. Doesn't mean, but yeah, so I feel like that's a kind of a question, but it's also someone's opinion, right? What's better, to go to a mental health counselor or to a family or a friend?
Yeah, I mean, I
Mhm.
think, yeah,
Yeah.
of course, we want to restore all the relationships that we can restore, Jill, but
Mhm.
we're in charge of our side of that coin,
Yeah.
right? We
Mhm.
can't ever make people, I wish I could make people behave.
Yeah,
But
and
we go ahead.
could you tell us a little about where mostly shame starts? Does it start from childhood trauma? Um,
Childhood trauma is a great big um, precursor. That yes, absolutely. That's why I said sometimes middle school drama is a
mhm.
place where you may end up, seeing a lot of this, start in your life. But um, it can be from family. I know you kind of alluded to that,
Mhm.
but I would say this about that. As you kind of walk through some things in your life and you heal on your own
Mhm.
with, like you said, with a third party person, or, with a trusted friend,
Yep.
or coworker, or, even a boss,
Yeah.
as you walk through some of these things, you will, as that starts to change in you, those old circumstances won't be the trigger that they used to be.
Yeah.
What we talk about, in mental health is, we can't change memories. Nobody can
True.
change our memories, right? We can't change what they were, but we can add to them, or we can see them through a different light. I always say, see them through a different lens. What other circumstances were going on with the people in those memories. So when a trigger comes to my head, I can say, yes, that happened, but
Mhm.
da 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 da. I can add to it, with other. It's so hard to this concept to do in 30 seconds, but with other circumstances, so that I won't ever make it go away, but I will widen what it looks like in my
Yeah.
memory.
Mhm.
It won't be all negative. I will add to it this and this and this. And actually you can see those neurons doing that in your brain. It's really cool.
Firing,
Yeah.
firing.
But actually firing and firing. But we want to always, like I said, the shame heals. That's why it heals with those unconditional love experiences.
Yeah.
So I want to be able to bring those in
That.
to those, maybe this happened to me, like you said, childhood trauma experience, but these people love me, these people care. Go back to the pretty women thing that we thought about. This is what I think about myself, but this is what someone else thinks of me. This is how they value me. This is, how they see me.
True.
Right?
Yeah, you're right.
Right. So I'm adding to it. She didn't change who she was. She added to it.
Well, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Remind us how we can reach you directly, please.
Yes, thefamilycollective.co.
Mhm.
And we would love to hear from you. And if you have any questions, or you have any additional thoughts, or you want to send
Please.
me some information, you can reach
Okay.
out to us on an email, and we would love to hear from you.
Thank you so much. Pleasure speaking with you. And yeah, thank you for today's topic of conversation. And I hope it raises some questions and raises some, thoughts out there of people who really may be in need of help, not to be ashamed, not to be afraid, because there are licensed mental health experts out there that can work with you. And again, if you're in the Charleston area, we found someone,
Yes.
thefamilycollective.co. Thank you so much for your time today, for being here, and looking forward to the next conversation. Thanks again. Very thorough. I appreciate that. And thanks for going
Yes.
down that list.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.